Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that's constantly shifting and getting, well, frankly, more complex. Banking fraud.
Yeah, and forget that old image of the hacker in a basement.
Right, we're now looking at these really well-oiled, financially strong criminal groups operating, globally.
Exactly. And their prime target, still bank accounts. That's where the big money is, the high-value returns.
Makes sense. So today we're trying to sort of demystify this modern banking fraud scene.
We'll be focusing specifically on account takeover ATO and its close cousin, new account fraud or NAF. We got some great expert insights to draw on here.
Okay, let's get into it. We'll look beyond just banking because this threat landscape, it actually stretches into online travel, telecom, e-commerce too.
That's a key point. It's wider than people might think.
Then we'll take a maybe slightly unsettling look inside these fraudster communities, see how they operate.
Yeah, kind of a behind enemy lines perspective.
We'll explore how attackers scale up their efforts using things like synthetic identities and those ATO techniques.
And of course, we have to talk about how we're fighting back.
Definitely. We'll look at current detection methods, what's working now, and then pivot to emerging tech in fraud prevention.
And maybe a little glimpse into the future, too.
Yeah, absolutely. What's next? Our goal here is really to give you a clear picture of these pretty complex issues, but, without making your head spin.
Right. And it's crucial to understand, like you said, this isn't just a banking problem. It spills over into online travel, telecom, e-commerce.
Pretty much anywhere, identity is the key, huh?
Exactly. Our sources highlight that identity is really the gateway for bad actors, especially in e-commerce. And that makes NAF the two biggest types of identity fraud there.
Okay, so let's just quickly define those again. Account takeover, that's getting control of someone's existing account, right?
Yeah, through stolen passwords, maybe session hijacking, things like that.
And new account fraud, NAF, that's creating brand new accounts.
Correct. Using either totally fake info or maybe a mix of stolen real details and fabricated ones. The goal is always financial gain, ultimately.
So why is e-commerce fraud, specifically, escalating so much?
Well, there are a couple of big reasons. First, just the sheer amount of internet traffic now makes it incredibly hard to monitor everything effectively.
That's too much noise.
Pretty much. And second, it's surprisingly easy for fraudsters to just, pop up fake online storefronts, run their scams, and then vanish. Quick setup, quick takedown.
And bringing it back to our main focus today, digital banking fraud in 2024. It's huge business.
Oh, absolutely. And these attacks, they're usually not just one person. Expert analysis consistently points to organized, well-funded criminal groups orchestrating them.
Which takes us inside those fraudster communities.
This is fascinating, if a bit dark.
It really is. The dark web has become this whole ecosystem, and a huge driver lately has been generative AI.
AI, of course.
Yeah, because while the mainstream tools like ChatGPT have safeguards built in, you find these dark web versions like FraudGPT or WormGPT being sold without those ethical breaks.
Okay, wow. So how are they actually using these AI tools? For pretty much every stage of an attack, honestly, finding vulnerabilities in systems, actually developing the attack tools, automating the attacks.
So they can hit more targets faster.
Exactly. And even figuring out the best ways to cash out, to monetize the accounts they compromise.
And you mentioned WormGPT. What's special about that one?
Well, it's particularly concerning. It's an AI cybercrime tool built on a powerful language model, and it's been trained specifically on loads of data, including malware info.
And no ethical boundaries, you said.
None whatsoever. It can write incredibly convincing phishing emails, it can generate actual malware code, and it can even give advice on, illegal strategies.
It's like having a dedicated AI consultant for crime. That's unsettling.
It really is. And these AI tools don't just help create attacks, they also speed up the whole process of selling validated consumer accounts on the dark web. Makes it easier for other criminals to buy working logins.
So there's a whole supply chain here.
Definitely. You've got different roles within these communities. Some people specialize in creating and selling what they call config files.
Config files. Like attack recipes.
Kinda, yeah. Pre-written scripts for specific targets that less technical fraudsters can just buy and use. Then you have others who do the reconnaissance, finding vulnerable websites or apps.
And then the buyers.
Right, the ones who buy the access to compromised accounts and focus purely on the monetization part, getting the money out.
You mentioned bank drops earlier in our prep. Tell us about those.
Yes. Bank drops are basically clean bank accounts, often opened online using fake or stolen credentials. They're used to move stolen money around without immediately triggering alerts.
Sort of like digital money mules.
Exactly. They're often called bad actor accounts. The key is they're kept looking legitimate, at least initially, to avoid detection while the funds are being laundered.
And what about tools for the attacks themselves? You mentioned Open Bullet.
Right, Open Bullet 2.0. Now, technically, this is a legitimate tool for web testing,
Right.
but
But the hackers love it.
they do, because it's really good at automating account takeover attacks stealthily and at a massive scale.
How does it stay stealthy?
It has features like one called Type Human, which actually mimics the pauses and variations of real human typing, makes it much harder for basic bot detection to catch.
Wow. So they're not just throwing passwords at a login page. They're actively trying to look like a real person.
Precisely. Which brings us neatly to how attackers scale these operations. Synthetic identities are a huge part of this.
Right, synthetic IDs, that's where they mix real and fake details.
Exactly. Combining maybe a real social security number with a fake name and address to create a seemingly legitimate but entirely fabricated identity.
And the losses from this are serious.
Oh, massive. We're talking billions just for US lenders. These synthetic IDs can then be used to open new fraudulent accounts or even help take over existing ones.
And for scaling account takeover, they use credential stuffing.
That's a very common method, often automated using tools like Open Bullet we just discussed. They take huge lists of leaked usernames and passwords from data breaches.
And just try them everywhere.
Pretty much. They bombard login portals, hoping for matches. And these attacks can be so intense, they sometimes even overload the servers.
And for new account fraud, creating those fake accounts, what helps them scale?
Bots and emulators are key there. Bots can be programmed to mimic human behavior during sign-up filling forms, clicking boxes. That's why AI-based detection is becoming so important on the defense side.
And emulators.
Emulators let one fraudster make it look like thousands of different new accounts are being created from thousands of different devices, different phones or computers. Harder to spot the pattern.
There was another term, sleeper accounts.
Ah, yes, sleeper accounts. These are actually legitimate customer accounts that already exist on, say, a merchant system.
Okay, so what do fraudsters do with them?
They might gain access to them, maybe through phishing or credential stuffing, but then they let the accounts sit dormant for a while.
Lila.
Exactly. Then, sometime later, maybe weeks or months, they'll activate it and start making fraudulent purchases, hoping they've slipped past the initial security checks because the account itself wasn't brand new.
Clever. And as defenses get better, are attackers changing tactics?
Definitely. We're seeing a significant rise in social engineering, or what you might just call scam attacks. As technical defenses like multi-factor authentication get stronger, fraudsters adapt by targeting the person.
Tricking the human.
Right. Phishing emails are classic, but also fake support calls, text messages, anything to trick someone into revealing their credentials, approving a login, or even sending money directly.
And those can be devastatingly effective, even if they seem simple.
Absolutely. People lose huge amounts of money to scams that exploit trust or urgency.
It's not always tricking, though. Sometimes they take direct control of devices.
Correct. Using things like remote access Trojans or RATs. These are nasty bits of malware, often delivered via malicious email attachments or dodgy links.
And once it's on the device,
the attacker can basically see everything you see, control your mouse and keyboard, access files, capture passwords, complete remote control.
Okay, so that's a pretty intimidating picture of the threats.
Yeah.
How are banks and other organizations actually trying to detect all this? What are the current methods?
Well, it's definitely a multi-layered approach. Our sources point to several key techniques being widely used right now.
Like machine learning, ML, that comes up a lot.
Yes, ML is fundamental. It's about training algorithms on vast amounts of data transaction data, user behavior data to spot patterns and anomalies.
Things that look out of the ordinary.
Exactly. Deviations from normal spending habits, unusual login times or locations, sequences of actions that are typical of fraud. And real-time ML is crucial, catching it as it happens, not after the fact.
Then there's behavioral analysis or behavioral biometrics. How's that different?
That focuses less on what you do and more on how you do it. It monitors your unique interaction patterns.
Yeah, how fast I type.
Exactly. Typing speed, rhythm, how you move your mouse, the angle you hold your phone, how you swipe. Very subtle things that are actually quite unique to you.
So if someone else logs in, even with my password, they might type differently.
Precisely. A significant deviation from your established pattern can be a strong signal that it's not actually you. It adds a layer that's hard to fake.
Okay, what else? Device fingerprinting.
Right, or device intelligence. This involves gathering lots of technical details about the device being used, the hardware, operating system, browser version, installed software, screen resolution, IP address.
To create a unique ID for the device.
Essentially, yes, a digital fingerprint. This lets systems recognize returning devices and flag new or unfamiliar ones trying to access an account.
Can it detect tampering too? Like if a phone is jailbroken?
It often can, yes. It can look for signs of rooting or jailbreaking, check if it's running inside an emulator simulator instead of being a real physical device, analyze the SIM card reputation, even use sensor data.
So it's trying to verify the device itself is trustworthy.
That's the idea. Flagging suspicious devices is a key defense.
You also mentioned clustering. What's that about?
Clustering likely refers to grouping similar things together, so maybe grouping accounts that show similar suspicious login patterns or transactions linked to the same few devices to identify potential fraud rings or coordinated attacks.
Finding connections and velocity checks.
Velocity checks are pretty straightforward. They monitor the rate of activity. A sudden burst of login attempts or many new accounts created from one IP address in minutes, or a rapid series of transactions that high velocity is often a sign of automated fraud.
Okay, so those are some of the established methods.
Yeah.
But things change fast. What about new and emerging tech? What's coming next in fraud prevention?
Good question. Our sources highlight 3 areas gaining traction or showing significant future potential.
3 key ones. Okay, what's the first?
Profiling. But it's evolving. It's not just about building profiles of your good customers anymore.
You mean profiling the fraudsters?
Exactly. Building up personas or profiles of typical fraudster behavior, trying to understand their common tactics, the sequences of actions they take, maybe how they approach checkout.
So you can anticipate their moves?
Sort of. By understanding known bad patterns, systems can get better at spotting those patterns when new attacks happen. Using AI and ML to analyze things like email addresses for subtle signs of being fake or synthetic is part of this too.
Interesting. Okay, what's the second emerging area?
Entity linking. This sounds a bit technical, but the concept is powerful.
Break it down for us.
It's about connecting the dots, linking different pieces of data, an email address, a phone number, a device ID, a physical address, an IP address, back to a single underlying entity, whether that's a person or a coordinated group.
Creating a bigger picture.
Right. Instead of looking at each data point in isolation, you build this graph showing the relationships. It helps you see if, say, one device is linked to dozens of new accounts, or if seemingly separate accounts share subtle links suggesting they're controlled by the same fraudster. It exposes hidden risks.
Got it. That makes sense. And the third one?
Large language models, LLMs. The same tech behind things like ChatGPT.
We talked about how fraudsters are using them, like with FraudGPT. But they can be used for defense, too.
That's the potential, yes.
Right.
It's a double-edged sword. For detection, LLMs could potentially analyze huge amounts of unstructured text data, customer service chat logs, loan applications, feedback forms.
Looking for what?
Subtle linguistic clues, inconsistencies, maybe patterns in language that correlate with known fraud tactics or social engineering attempts. Trying to understand the nuance in communication that might indicate deception.
But the sources mainly focus on the threat side for now.
Yeah, at the moment, the discussion seems more focused on the immediate threat posed by LLMs in the hands of criminals, but the defensive potential is definitely being explored.
Okay, so profiling, entity linking, LLMs. What else is developing? Passwordless authentication comes up a lot.
Absolutely. Moving away from traditional passwords is a big push, mainly to combat phishing. Things like FIDO2 passkeys, using your device's biometrics or security key instead of a typed password.
Is everyone jumping on board?
It's growing, but interestingly, some vendors are focusing more on strengthening detection around existing login methods using behavioral signals rather than going fully passwordless immediately. But WebAuthn, QR code logins, biometrics, they're all part of that trend.
And AI and ML are embedded in a lot of these newer authentication and risk scoring tools.
No, definitely. Real-time risk scoring is key. Platforms analyze user behavior right from the start of a session, generating a dynamic risk score that can trigger step-up authentication if needed. It's about continuous assessment, not just a one-time check at login.
So looking even further ahead now, what do the experts see coming down the pike? What are the big future challenges?
Well, one major concern highlighted is deepfake KYC. Know your customer.
Using AI-generated fakes to pass identity checks.
Exactly. With Gen AI getting so good, the fear is that sophisticated deepfake images or even videos could fool the identity verification processes used when opening accounts.
Like submitting a fake passport photo that looks real.
Or even a video deepfake that could potentially pass a liveness test where you have to move your head or blink to prove you're real. And voice cloning could maybe trick voice authentication systems.
Wow, okay, that sounds like a serious escalation.
It is. It makes verifying identity remotely much, much harder. Another big prediction is the continued rise of fraud AI.
Meaning AI used by both sides.
Precisely. AI is going to be the central battleground. Fraudsters will use AI to launch faster, smarter, more adaptive attacks. And defenses must leverage AI advanced ML, maybe even defensive Gen AI tools, just to keep pace with the sheer volume, velocity, and variety of threats.
An AI arms race, basically.
In a way, yes. And the third big future trend is a shift in thinking towards prevention by design.
Prevention by design. What does that mean in practice?
It means moving away from just reacting to fraud after it happens, or bolting on security measures as an afterthought. Instead, you build security and fraud prevention right into the core design of your systems, your products, your user journeys from the very beginning.
Like designing the login flow to be inherently more secure.
Exactly. Or using privacy-preserving ways to verify identity, making user security education part of the experience, designing systems to minimize the data exposed if there is a breach. The goal is to make fraud harder, less attractive, and ideally prevent it from happening in the first place, rather than just detecting it later.
So a more proactive stance.
Definitely. Shifting left, as they sometimes say in development, addressing the risk earlier in the process.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. I think the key takeaway is that modern banking fraud, especially NAF and ATO, isn't opportunistic anymore. It's highly organized, well-resourced, and uses increasingly sophisticated tools like Gen AI, synthetic IDs, automation tools like OpenBullet.
Right. And the attackers are adaptable, shifting towards social engineering when technical defenses get tough. We looked at the current detection stack too. The layers like machine learning, behavioral analysis, device intelligence, clustering, velocity checks, all working together.
And we touched on those emerging technologies, profiling fraudsters, linking entities to see the bigger picture, and the double-edged sword of large language models, plus the move towards passwordless and stronger authentication.
It really feels like a constant cat and mouse game.
It absolutely is. Staying ahead means being proactive, constantly learning about the evolving threats, and being willing to adopt and adapt innovative security measures. You can't stand still.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to mull over.
Yeah.
Given these rapid advances on both sides, the attackers getting smarter, the defense is getting more complex, what fundamental shifts do we need in how we even think about digital identity and trust in the coming years? How do we truly secure this digital world we rely on?
Yeah, it's a huge question. Balancing that tightrope between robust security, a smooth user experience, and, well, the never-ending ingenuity of those trying to break the system.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.